Shalom and welcome to Yeshiva B'nai Noach. I'm Tom Averna as we continue with our beginning biblical Hebrew course. Chapter 12, as we finish up the section on the imperfect tense, dealing with drop letters, letters that will drop out. And this is the review of that chapter. We begin with our oral review from the chapter, page 105. Reading the Hebrew. Avraham kara leDavid v'David lo shama. Avraham yikra leDavid v'David lo yishmar. Naomi shalcha lechem le'am Yisrael ki hi shama'a b'kol ha'avot. Naomi tishlach lechem le'am Yisrael ki hi tishma b'kol ha'avot. Kara'u malchei Moav lechol anshei haaretz vehem malchu b'Moav. Yichreu malchei Moav lechol anshei haaretz vehem yimlechu ad olam. Eftach et ha-she'arim v'ani emtza kesef. Tiftach et sha'ar beit lechem v'ata timtza cherev. Tiftechi et sha'arei ha'etz v'at timtzei et Naomi Yiftach et sha'arei ha'bayit ve'et hamishpacha yimtza. Tiftach et sha'arei ha'sadeh ve'et kol habehemot timtza. Im nechtov et hadevarim az nizkor et asher amarnu. Im tichtevu et divrei Naomi az tizkeru et asher amra. Im yichtevu et divrei ha-shalom az lo yizkeru et kalei hamilchama v'et hadam. Im nichtov et divrei hakohanim az nizkor od et darchei Yerushalayim. Im lo tichtavu od et divrei ha'avot az lo tizkeru et yimei Mitzrayim. So now let's move into the chapter itself. This is the vocab for chapter 12. There are no new vocab words in chapter 12. This is simply a review of all of the verbs that we've had so far. So each of the verbs then we'll be dealing with in terms of what their imperfect tense conjugation is like. And let's just go through this vocabulary then. And we'll look at a couple of things as we go through it. So achal, I'm using the perfect tense voweling, but achal is to eat, amar, to say, and then these two have the aleph to begin with, so you'll see that that's important because that aleph will drop out in the first person conjugation, since that is the first person conjugation is an aleph, so be aware of that. Halach, to walk or go, and then the hey, we'll talk about the Yonah letters, but the hey drops out, so this is a two-letter root, lach. Zechar, to remember. Yada, to know, the yud will drop out, so this is a two-letter root. Yashav, the yud will drop out in the imperfect tense, so this will be a two-letter root. Again, you'll see all of this as we get to it. Katav, to write. Lekach, to take. The lamed will drop out, so this will be a two-letter root. Malach, to rule or reign. Matzah, to find. Patach, to open. Kara, to call or proclaim. Shalach is to send. Shama, to listen, and shamar, to guard or keep. Okay, so your goal is, as the book points out, is that you should be able to know all of these verbs in both their perfect and imperfect forms. So we have here 2, 4, 6, 7, 14, 15 verbs. There's actually 21 that we've learned to date. So that will be there'll be 6 of them then that are absent from this list for a specific reason, which we'll see later on. Okay. So here, more than ever, recognizing patterns becomes very important. Drop letter imperfect, the imperfect tense has a whole new conjugation that you have to learn. But there is a pattern to it, just as there was a pattern, if you will, to the perfect tense. There's a pattern here too that if you pick that up, it'll make it a whole lot easier to deal with. So the irregular verbs are primarily the ones that start with one of the Yonah letters as well as Lamed. So the Yonah letters, spelling the name of Jonah or Yonah, are Yud, Vav, Nun, and Hey. Those are the 4 Yonah letters. But then the Lamed is also included in that. So the way that, one way to remember that is if you say Le Yonah, which is 2 or 4, a dove. Yonah not only is the name of the prophet Jonah, but it also is the name for a dove. So the Yonah letters oftentimes will fly away. So remember, your Yonah letters are the ones that will tend to drop off of verbs in the imperfect tense if they are the first letter. So Lamed, Yud, Vav, Nun, and He, Layona. And then also remember the aleph is going to drop off if a verb begins with an aleph, but only in the first person singular. Again, since the signal letter, the prefix letter of the first person singular is an aleph, it would just make sense that you're not going to have two alephs in a row. So that's the trick here. Remember your Yona letters with the Lamed, Le Yona, and remember the aleph also will be a little different in terms of how it's set up in the imperfect tense. All right, your book points out that you can check on the verb spelling chart on pages 370 and 372. Also, I will show you at the end of this review. I'll show you the handouts that are available up on Google Docs that will give you all of the verbs and conjugations in the imperfect tense. And also Quizlet will allow you to practice that as well. So we'll talk about that as we continue on. So again, don't get too stressed out on this. So the point, especially as we've talked about before, our point here in teaching this is not to teach you to write Hebrew. So you really don't have to remember how, what letters drop off and how to write it, but you do have to recognize it. You have to do, when you're reading, you'll have to recognize it, right? So that's our goal here. Page 107 gives you this chart on the page. So here are the pronouns: I, you, masculine singular, you feminine singular, he, she, we, you masculine plural, you feminine plural, him, they, and hena, they masculine and they feminine. So those are the pronouns. And then taking a look in the imperfect tense, then you see how these four verbs are going to look. So to walk or went, halach. Again, hey is one of the Yona letters, so that drops off. Yud, one of the Yona letters, so that drops off. Lamed, one of the Yona letters, so that drops off. And Yud, again, one of the Yona letters, so that drops off. So we have Elech, Eshev, Kach, and Da, all mean I will. And one of the things I would recommend is you begin to recognize the first letter of an imperfect tense. That gives you the pronoun. So I would just automatically, when you see that, begin, even if you don't know what the verb is yet or don't recognize the verb, begin with I will. I will. I will. I will. And then figure out the verb. So you come across this, I will lach, two-letter root, not sure I recognize it, so now try inputting some Yona letters. Yud, yelech, well, not in this configuration, no. The hey, halach, yes, halach is walk or went. So I will go, or I will walk. All right, so again, you're just going to recognize these opening letters, the prefix, and you're going to figure out which of the pronouns is represented by the prefix. And then if there's, in the singular, primarily, you only have a prefix. So I will, you will. You don't know whether this is, just by seeing the tav, you know that it's going to be you will. You don't know yet whether it's masculine, feminine, singular, or masculine, feminine, plural. For that, you'll have to look a little further. But in this case, there's nothing on the end, so it's just you, masculine, singular. And remember that it can also be, the exception here, it can also be she will. But this is the primary one you're going to run across is you, masculine singular. Okay? So this is the chart. Look it over. The note 23 on the chak is simply saying when the lamed or nun drop off, a dagesh appears in the second letter. So you see the dagesh here in the kaf, and that's why. Since you don't necessarily have to write the words, so you're not going to need to know that, but if you see there's a dagesh there and don't know why, that's why. And that also tells you that either a lamed or a nun starts this verb. If the second letter doesn't have to be a kaf, if the second a kuf rather, if the second letter has a dagesh in it, chances are it's a verb that begins with a lamed or a nun. So that's what the note 23 has to say. Now, aside from the Yona letters I mentioned, you also have to be careful of any verb that starts with an aleph, because that aleph in the first person, singular, is going to be replaced by another aleph, so it could be a little confusing. So here you see okhal, which is I will eat, and Omar, I will say. All right, but you see those three letters, it looks like the root, if it were in the perfect tense, it would be I ate, or I said, or he ate, or he said would be what that would be in the perfect tense. So how do you tell the difference? We'll talk about this a little bit more again, but just a quick reminder. The perfect tense, this is very important to remember, the perfect tense, the past tense, is almost always going to have a kamatz as the first vowel under the letter. So if you see an aleph without a kamatz in a verb, then you can pretty much guess that that is not the perfect tense that you're looking at. It's the imperfect tense. And then take a look at your voweling, and that will completely give it away. So again, achal would be the past tense. Ochal is the first person singular imperfect tense. Achal would be third person, masculine, he. Ochal is first person, I. Okay. So that's the only thing you have to remember about the otherwise, you still have the three-letter root. It's always going to appear outside of this first person conjugation. Okay. Otherwise, it'll be the same as the conjugations of all of the other imperfect verbs. Right? So just remember that. So now on page 108, your book tells you that it's easy to recognize the imperfect tense. And one of the reasons it's easy is because there are really only 4 letters in your prefix that you have to remember. And there's the pattern I'm talking about. So there are only 4 letters that you're looking for. If you see one of these 4 letters, then that tells you in front of the verb, in front of the root of the verb, that tells you that this is in the imperfect tense as a prefix. Okay, so that we're just talking about prefixes. So under prefixes, there are 4 letters that you have to know. And over here, if you begin to think about this pattern, okay, then it's pretty simple. Aleph is always going to be I will. Nun always going to be we will. Yud will have a plural form, but Yud is always he, or the plural of he, which would be they. So he or they will, if there's a suffix, but Yud by itself is simply he will. And Tav by itself is you will. Okay, primarily. There also is the one exception where the Tav also could be she will. She will. All right? But you see the Tav, essentially, just begin to think to yourself, you see a Tav, it's you something, whether it's feminine, masculine, singular, plural, you don't know yet, but it's just you. You will do something. That's the tav. So memorizing those 4 letters and their pronouns will make it very easy to get through this. Now, the next thing you're going to look for is a suffix. So here's these 4 letters are the only prefix you have to deal with. But in the suffix, you also have 4 letters you're going to deal with. So if you have, let's start with the tav. If you have a tav, you know that it can be one of 4 choices in terms of you. It's either you masculine singular, you feminine singular, you masculine plural, or you feminine plural. All of them will start with the tav. So how do you tell the difference? The plurals will always have a suffix. A suffix. So tav plus an u to u means you masculine plural will do something. A tav with the suffix of a yud is feminine, and this will throw you a little bit because yud you're not used to seeing as a feminine word marker. But in this case, as a suffix, it would be you with the yud, you feminine singular, okay? And then in the plural, when you see na as an ending, so this has a hey, which kind of helps you a little bit. Na is you feminine plural will, or it can also be they feminine will. Both cases plural, both cases feminine. Okay, so Tina. So one of the ways I would remember it is Tina is a girl's name, right? Tina. So Tina is feminine plural. You or they, Tina. And T, so if you're having T with Tina, so you can kind of put these 2 together and know that T then is your feminine singular. So T and Tina are both feminine prefixes and suffixes. T and Tina. And then the last one is the yud with the u ending. They will. So really, I said 4, but there really are only 4 vowels that you have to, or 4 consonants you have to remember here. So the u ending is actually vowels, but the vav suffix. So the u suffix can either be you masculine plural if it starts with a tav, or they masculine plural if it starts with a yud. But the u is going to represent a plural of something. And then the e and the na will represent the feminine of something, in one case singular, in one case plural. All right, a little bit complicated, but essentially you'll get used to it. It'll make sense, but don't. The main thing I want you to come away with here is that it really is simply a matter of memorizing your 4 prefix letters and the 3 suffix letters that go with it. If you memorize those 7 letters, prefixes and suffixes, then you've got the imperfect tense down perfectly. They say, all right, so again, as your book says in 108, begin looking for the prefix. After that, look for the suffix. And then look at the letters that remain between the prefix and the suffix. There's either going to be 2 or 3, in some cases 1, but right now just worry about the 2 or 3. If there's only 2, then you know there's a drop letter in there. If there's 3, piece of cake, you can recognize your verb root. Okay, so begin looking for the prefix, then see if there's a suffix that goes with it, and then you have what's left over is the root. So you see the yud and the u, you know that this means they will do something. Yud and u, they will do something. Halach, walk or go, so they will walk or they will go. Okay. The tav and the yud would be the feminine singular. So this is you feminine singular will do something. Okay. And then aleph is I, and nun is we. So really is simple if you just focus on these main patterns of prefixes and suffixes. Now I mentioned earlier, this is from page 108 in your book, I mentioned earlier that when you have an aleph in a verb, it's going to drop out because the first letter of I, conjugation in the imperfect, starts with an aleph. So the same is going to be true if your verb starts with a tav, a yud, or a nun. Okay? Because that's going to be, remember, one of your four prefixes are one of these four letters. So if your verb starts with a tav, a yud, or a nun, then those will drop out just as the aleph did in whatever position you would normally see the tav, the yud, or the nun in the imperfect tense. So that's the only other thing you have to watch for. But if you know your prefixes as well as your roots of your verbs, you can pretty much figure out what's going on. Okay? And also then, same rule for here as I told you for the aleph. Your first letter, okay, if this were yada, this would be he knew. But there's no kamatz here. So it's yeda, he will know. That's your clue. He will know. That's your clue. There's no kamatz here. There's no kamatz here. There's no kamatz here. Okay? In the past tense, there is a kamatz, a kamatz, a kamatz. So yada, yashvu, amar, all past tense, but yeda would be he will know. Yesh, vu, they will settle, yud, u. Omar, I will say. There's no kamatz. If there's no kamatz under the first letter, don't confuse it with a perfect tense. It will only be a perfect tense if you see the kamatz under the first letter. And so that's your huge clue about that. And that's essentially what your note here on 24 is going to say. Okay? And we don't have any verbs in this so far that we've had that begin with nun, so you're just going to be dealing with the verbs that we have that begin with yud. A tav, do we have a tav? I'm not sure if we do, but anyway, yud or aleph. Okay? That's from page 108. And the last thing your book talks about is how to distinguish perfect from imperfect. Again, very simple. Does it have a kamatz under the first letter? Does the root have a prefix? Okay. If the answer to does the root have a prefix is no, one of the four-letter prefixes that you're familiar with, then it is not imperfect. It would be the perfect tense. And it has a suffix, again telling you that it's the perfect tense. Okay? If you see a verb that has a prefix, because you recognize the verb is shalach or shamar, so it's got a prefix, then you know it's in the imperfect or future tense. Okay? We're simplifying that. It's not always future, it's not always past, but that's the basic understanding. Okay, so if it has a letter without a kamatz under it and it's a prefix to the root, then it is imperfect. And then it may also have a suffix, but this is the primary distinction, is it has a prefix before the root. Either a three-letter root or a two-letter root, but there's always going to be a prefix in front of it. If that prefix is replacing one of the three letters in the root, then it's going to have a vowel besides a kamatz under it. So that's the easy way to tell. So that's essentially what your book covers and talks about in terms of the perfect, imperfect tense. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but I do just want to show you these are available for you up on Google Docs. So I've done this in a few different forms. So these are all of the verbs that we've had so far. So if you like them with color coding, then this might be the thing you'll want to reprint or look at. But this has all of the different verbs that we've had there should be 3 pages of this. These two, and then the next one here. So that gives you the 21 verbs that we've had so far, with all of their conjugations in all of the pronoun groups. You can see here. All right, and then if you just like a plain simple chart, then we've got this that will be up on Google Docs as well, which again just deals with the roots. Now this is backwards, and I have redone this chart, so I haven't changed it here, but you'll find it where it's in the Hebrew form. So you have the root over here and going from right to left. But anyway, same information. So it shows you the root and then all of the imperfect tenses and their conjugations for the different pronouns. Okay, so that's available to you again up on Google Docs. Take a look at that. If that helps you, wonderful. And I'll continue to try. And of course, all of this is also in the back of your book, of your First Hebrew Primer book. But just if you want something separate to keep in front of you, since this is just the verbs that we've had so far, then that will work. And then also don't forget that all of these are also up on Quizlet, so that you can begin looking at Quizlet and begin practicing. And there are flashcards not only for all of the conjugations, I believe, are up there. I think there's 150 some of them that you can go through if you want to do it, word by word or conjugation by conjugation. But then also there's another flashcard set that will just talk about the Aleph, the Yud, the Nun, the Tav, as the 4 prefix letters and what they mean. You can practice that on the flashcards, as well as the prefix suffix, what that means just by itself, so that you have the general idea of how to use that. The other thing that is up on Quizlet also that I haven't really talked about, not sure that I necessarily need to, but I do point out that the voweling under the first letter, there are actually 4 different vowels that could appear. All right? Not something you necessarily need to know, but in case you do, that is something that is up there for you to look at. So I'm not going to spend any more time on that, but that is also up on Quizlet. You can see, so it could be an E vowel, could be an E vowel, could be an O vowel, could be a segol, a tsere, a double dot, an A vowel. I don't have examples of all of those here on this particular screen, but again, it could be the E, the segol, could be an O that would appear next to the Aleph, let's say. Could be a tsere under the Aleph, just the 2 dots, or it could be a patak, a simple straight line, A vowel. So all those, there are four different vowels that essentially will always appear under your imperfect tense letter. Just something extra. If you want to know, that's there to know. Here's an O as an example of the O here that would appear. Okay, so that'll be up there, and that's primarily just dealing with the first letter to recognize what could be either under the first letter or next to the first letter, in the context of identifying it as an imperfect tense verb. Okay? So that's a look at drop letter imperfects. We covered that in both Chapter 11 and Chapter 12. We'll start exercises for Chapter 12 in the next class, and then Tall Tales and the Sefer Ruth in the third class of Chapter 12. So all of that coming up, which will give you plenty of practice. I just highly advise you to spend time on Quizlet to really review your verbs and your verb endings as well as prefixes. Now, both of those things you should remember the suffixes from the perfect tense, and now the prefixes and suffixes from the imperfect tense. Once you have those down, those are the only two tenses. There are subcategories that we'll get to later on in the book under each of those two tenses, but primarily that's it. You've got the patterns. You'll be able to use those over and over again. So we'll be working on that. And then, like I say, we'll do the exercises to help you firm up on that. That'll be coming up next class. But spend some time on Quizlet. Download the handouts if you need to or want to. They're available to you on Google Docs. The links to Quizlet and Google Docs, both on the information page, the description page for each of the classes. All right, so thanks for spending this time with me. I'm Tom Averna on Yeshiva B'nai Noach. Shalom.